Hi, I'm United States Air Force Chief Master Sergeant retired Chief Terry Speer, and you're watching Dingo Talk.
You wanna know by now. You wanna know by now. You wanna know by now. You wanna know. You wanna know. You want.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. My guest, retired United States Air Force Chief Terry Speer.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Hey.
It's good to have you.
Carlo. Glad to be here.
So, normally we would talk with our guests about their decision from their senior year going into college. Chief, you did not take that route.
I did
At
not.
17 years old, you decided to go into the military. What factored into that decision?
Well, it was a long time ago, Carlo. It's hard to remember, but there's a lot of things. I was really young senior. I was the youngest student in my class. I turned 17 late January of my senior year. So when it came down to going to college and doing those things, I always considered myself smart enough, but I just didn't think I was mature enough. So it was a matter of maturity. I wasn't ready for that, and a bunch of friends of mine and I said we're all going to join the Air Force, and I ended up being the only one to sign the papers and go.
So why the Air Force? Why the Air Force, not Army, not Navy? What was your...
Well, the Air Force is a little more corporate. It's not as military as the other services. And so I had kind of, in my mind, racked and stacked the services. And I said Air Force, Navy, and then the Marine Corps and the Army just weren't something I wanted to do. Now, maybe the Coast Guard. Coast Guard would have been something I might have wanted to do, but the Air Force was always the one in my mind.
Now, where did you end up for training?
Well, the first place you go when you join the Air Force is basic training, and in 1979, the only place for that, and as is still now, is the Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. So you end up there first, and then I ended up signing up to be a security policeman. Now they're called security forces. And as a security policeman, back then it was either you were security or law enforcement. Security guarded weapons, guarded resources, and law enforcement is basic cop. And the technical school for that was a half a mile down the road from my basic training squadron at Lackland Air Force Base.
So what is basic like? What is basic training like for those that maybe don't have anybody involved in the military?
I think it's different now. I think as I visited back to Lackland several times over my career, it's a little bit different now. It was almost like going to basic training was putting you in shape, tearing you down as a individual thinking civilian, and recreating you as an Air Force person, right? So part of it was physical, part of it's mental, part of it's social, and that's what it was like for us back then. Now, being involved as I am with kids who go in the Air Force and the military all the time, we always tell them it's not the place to go to get in shape. You need to be in shape before you go, and actually recruiters really concentrate on that now, is getting kids into shape so that when they hit the ground at Lackland or wherever they may be going for other services, they're ready for that. I was not. I mean, I played baseball a little bit. I did some other physical fitness activities, but I was not ready for what they put me through. So it was brutal for the first couple of weeks until I caught up with where I needed to be. But it's a place that they teach you about the history and the expectations of being an airman, and then once they get that and you graduate, they send you off to teach you the technical part of what you're going to do for the Air Force.
Now, what was your next stop? Was just a mile down the road, right?
Not even like a half a mile down the road.
So you went, being that you're here in Bethany,
Yeah.
You went from Chambers General Store down to the campus.
That's about right, exactly. And then the good part about that is it's familiar. The bad part of it, it's familiar because you walk down past there and you get these like cringes of what you just experienced over the past 7 weeks. But
so once you're out of your training and whatnot, what is your first, as a military member, where was your first, where were you first stationed?
Okay, it was a little place in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan called K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base. halfway between Lake Superior and Lake Michigan.
And how long were you there?
4 years. 4 years. Now, what's important though is, but they still have different. When you enlist, you can enlist in the Air Force for 4 or 6 years. I enlisted for 6 years.
Okay.
So I was at KI for 4 years, and then they offered me an opportunity for an assignment in Germany, which is what I really, really wanted to do, is go overseas.
So you did end up going overseas.
I did.
And so what was that experience like?
It was incredible. I mean, it was my first time out of the country. I'm from Freeport, Pennsylvania. I had been to Florida once, and
which is a country in its own.
Exactly, and in Ohio several times,
which is also a country in its own.
That never outside the borders of the United States. And so when I landed at Frankfurt, it was just a completely different thing for me. But I loved it. My heritage is part German. I speak a little German. I took 4 years of German in high school, and it was just a great experience.
Now, from Germany, do you end up, is that, because we were talking before we started recording, you ended up in Italy for a little bit of time. Was that from Germany? Is that the next stop is into?
Nope. It's a big gap. In fact, when I get to Germany, I was on flight, security police duties, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no holidays for cops. And so I was on flight. It was 3 swings, which was 3 to 11, 3 mids, 11 to 7, and 3 days off. And then typically they took 1 or 2 of those days either for training or something else. So it was and the base I was at was stationed at was a hardcore NATO operation, standing guard against the Soviet horde at the time during the Cold War. And so it was a really hard assignment, but there was a lot of great things to do off duty. I took some classes, and I met my wife there, and we got married there. So my life changed in a lot of different ways. She had 2 young girls, and so I went from, this really work hard, play hard kind of guy to now I'm married to a woman who's got an amazing career of her own, 2 great young ladies, and that was me, right? So then we got an assignment to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina, which is Goldsboro, North Carolina, and we were there for almost 6.5, 7 years. We had a son there, added to the family, and then got an assignment to Aviano Air Base in Italy, northern Italy. Well,
so now you talk about the classes, and we will come back to being an Aviano, because clearly I would like to hear about Italy. But so you talked about you started to take classes. At what point, for those of you that don't know, Chief is also an educator, 14 years now.
Yes, sir.
At what point did that start to, like, when you're taking these classes in your spare time, what is your goal for when you leave the Air Force? Or was there not a plan for leaving the Air Force?
That's a really good question, because when you're in the Air Force and you're enlisted, you enlist, you don't have to have a bachelor's degree. You high school education, and there you are. The Air Force offers, while you're in the military, 100% tuition assistance. And there are universities who have contracts on military bases all over the world. And overseas in Europe, mostly University of Maryland, and several other smaller colleges. And so you kind of piece your degree together over years, depending on how much time you have and you want to do. So you just start somewhere. And one of the counselors said, listen, start with something you'll enjoy and that you're good at. So I had 4 years of German in high school. At the time, I was dating a German girl who didn't speak any English. So what do you think I took?
German.
I took a German class.
Yeah,
exactly.
Makes sense.
Exactly.
Makes
so
sense.
that's what I did. And ironically, that's where I met my wife. So
the German girlfriend's out.
Exactly.
The wife is in.
Exactly.
Building relations. That's what we're doing.
That's a conversation, correct?
Creates community.
It sure does. And in my case, creates a new family and a new life. So that worked out really, really well for me. And but that's how you build your education in the Air Force. It's kind of piecemeal as you can, right? And they encourage it. In fact, when I was growing up you're an enlisted person in the Air Force. Not many enlisted people had bachelor's degrees or master's degrees or even, let alone doctor's degrees.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it's almost a requirement for
To have a
seniors,
bachelor.
I mean, it's not a requirement to get in, certainly, but if you expect to attain chief master sergeant or any other of the senior grades, you're expected to have a degree.
Well, and before we jump into your time in Italy, can you explain that a little bit when you break down how, because we were talking about titles and how if I said chief in your intro instead of that you designating that you were in the Air Force, that could mean something different
Right.
to the Navy.
Right.
So what is the difference?
So in the Navy, a chief is a series of ranks, E7, 8, and 9.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you called me chief and Navy people were listening and missed our introduction of DingoTalk, then they might assume that I was in the Navy. In the Air Force, it's a specific one rank. It's Chief Master Sergeant. And the grades E1 through E9 signify the different ranks. So E9 is the highest enlisted grade, and that's a Chief Master Sergeant. So in the Air Force, if Air Force people are listening and they heard you call me chief, they would know exactly what position I had.
So you're in North Carolina. How does Italy become? I mean, how does that work when they give you a new assignment? So you were in Germany for 4 years.
Right.
You're in North Carolina for about 6 years. You said.
Yes.
How does that new? I guess what's the logistics of the new? Like when they give you a new assignment, and how did you end up in Italy, and what was your experience like?
Well, it's different depending on where you're assigned. So, for example, overseas assignments they have beginnings and endings.
Mm-hmm.
You know when those are. So if you're a single person not taking any dependents with you and you get a 3-year or 2-year assignment in Germany, you know when you start and you know when you end. And as you get towards the end, you either ask to stay again, and that's dependent on how well you did and whether your commander needs you or not, or you get an assignment back to the United States. When you're in the United States, you get there and there's not necessarily an end in sight. There's no end game until you actually receive an assignment.
Okay.
And you can manipulate that by changing. They used to call them dream sheets. You would go into the personnel section and you would put the bases that you wanted to go to and the countries you wanted to go to, or in the United States. And then as a assignment opportunity comes up there, they may match you depending how long you've been in that particular assignment. So I was a security policeman. My wife, by the time we started to look for assignments out of Seymour Johnson, she was a first sergeant. And the first sergeant works directly for the commander for morale, discipline, and those kinds of things. So that's pretty easy to match those together because one of the other factors, Carlo, was that I was married to another enlisted person. So they had to find a place that we could both go to, which makes it more difficult. So that's why we ended up probably staying in North Carolina for a little over, almost 7 years we were there.
So then when you end up in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
what is your day-to-day like?
Well, initially, when we get to Aviano, it was a sleepy little base in northern Italy, just about an hour and a half drive north of Venice, right up against the Dolomite Mountains, right? The pre-Alps.
Yeah.
And so we're between the Adriatic and the Alps, very California-like weather. The summers are hot, and the winters are very, very mild. But you could, no kidding, golf at Aviano in December or in January. You could go to the golf course and golf, and then drive 15 minutes to the top of Piancavallo and ski. So that kind of place. Go to the Adriatic and go down to the beaches and stuff. Really great place. And when we get there, not much going on, right? No assigned aircraft. Small security police squadron, smaller or medium-sized security police squadron. Not a whole lot going on. And then this thing in Bosnia-Herzegovina occurred. The Serbs and the Croats in Bosnia, and the war there, and the no-fly zone over there, and then a bunch of people coming, and we had the Marines and the Air Force and the Army and the Marine and our Marine Corps, the Spanish. I mean, it was
a big
thousands of people flying combat missions out of Aviano for the whole time we were there.
Now, when you say no, I'm sure other people have, and maybe I'm naive to not know that no-fly zone. Obviously, you're not permitted to be in that area. But how do, as in the Air Force specifically, how is that monitored? Is it just the guy in the tower that calls out, or are there jets, almost like a cop car doing a regular patrol, but you're in the air?
Actually, there are deployable air control squadrons that kind of go they assign them in specific areas, and they monitor, and they know what's supposed to be there and what's not supposed to be there. And as our pilots fly around there waiting to be called upon, they're told, hey, go check this out, or this is going on. So, and the people who would fly there know that.
Yeah.
So that's deterrence is the big deal. Is deterring people who might be used against ground forces in those areas. They fly those things so that they deter them.
Yeah. So, how long are you in Italy? And
little over 6 years, actually.
Where you were in Italy to start, is that where that was your whole time there, or did you spend some time in other parts?
Well, that's a good question too, Carl. It really is. So my wife was the first sergeant for several different squadrons. One of them was the Triple Nickel Fighter Squadron. So she got to deploy and go temporary duty to many places with them. And then I was a security policeman. I decided to retrain to be a first sergeant as well. And then the second year that I was a first sergeant for the supply squadron at Aviano, our command chief, master sergeant, the top chief of the base, came to breakfast with all the first sergeants on a monthly basis. He came down there and he said, I've got some opportunities for first sergeants to deploy to places like Croatia and in support of Operation Deny Flight. And so one of them was Zagreb, Croatia. The other one was Tuzla Air Base in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And so I drew the short straw. The guy that went to Zagreb got to stay in a 5-star hotel and hang out in downtown Zagreb. And I went to a place that I can only describe as a bad episode of MASH. And I walked around in a helmet and flat vest with my M16, my 9mm, stayed in a canvas tent with roll-up sides. No still, but it was an interesting assignment. But like anything else in life, you make out of it what you can. And I ended up having a load of opportunities. I was assigned to the airbase group that was there, but I worked for the 1st Armored Division and the sergeant major of that 1st Armored Division, and I was there 6 months, and it was really one of the most memorable deployments of my career. And after that, I got back to Aviano, and I was named the 1st Sergeant of the Year for the United States Air Force. Not just the wing, not just the numbered Air Force, not just my command, but the entire United States Air Force. And it was all about the service that I had the opportunity to do when I was in Bosnia.
Now, when you come back from Bosnia, is there another couple missions that you, or assignments that you pick up?
Well, you just you fold right back into when you go to temporary duty, it's unlike the Army where they all kind of deploy together and then they come back together. The Air Force does it a little different. They piecemeal, they piece together deployed groups, and you've got to go, in different. Now, Desert Storm and Desert Shield was a little bit different, and we skipped over that. That was kind of my Seymour Johnson thing when I was in North Carolina. I was at Desert Shield and Desert Storm as a security policeman, and we went as a unit. A bunch of us went as a unit. But typically the Air Force pieces things together. So I was from Aviano. Our commander was from, I can't remember exactly where he's from, but somewhere in the United States. There were pieces and parts from all over the United States and Europe there deployed to do a singular mission, and you have to really quickly form into a team.
Now, I guess the other side to that is on a regular day, You know, you're not deployed. You're not doing a special. What was a regular day like for? So you're in a foreign country. You're on a military base. What's that? What for a civilian? What is that? What's that day like for an active duty serviceman?
First of all, this is northern Italy. I'm an hour and a half north of Venice. I'm up against the Dolomites, the Prealps. I have all these things that to do. Aviano at the time, and we're talking about 93 to 98, 99 time period. We didn't have any military housing, none on base, and typically bases have military housing where you can live on a secure area. Aviano had none. So we lived off base, lived in an Italian community. Our son, when we got there, was 4, going to be 5. So we had to find some place for him to go to school. And he ended up going to what's called an asilo, which is Italian kindergarten, right? And it was at the local Catholic church. Now, we're not Catholic, but didn't matter, right? So we would drop him off. He didn't speak a lick of Italian at the time. And it was pretty chaotic initially because he didn't want to go because he didn't understand them and they didn't understand him. But not long after that, the kids started speaking Italian. And when we would go places, whether it was a festival or some other Italian place, I started noticing him jump in and say, "Dad, that's not what he said."
Lead the conversation.
And lead the conversation and translate for us for a while. So
and this is a 5-year-old, 5, 6, 7-year-old. Yeah, that's...
Yeah. So when we left, he was 10. And by that time, after the first year at the asilo, he said, "Okay, what's next? Go to first grade." Yes. Okay. So now you can, on military bases overseas, where we can bring dependents, wives, husbands, sons, daughters. There are elementary schools, high schools, all of that run by the Department of Defense. Okay, Department of Defense schools. So I said, "Okay, Ryan, you're going to go to the base with all the other American boys and girls, and you're going to be in first grade." And he said, "No, I want to go across the street and go to the
Italian
school with my friends from asilo." So we had a friend who was married to an Italian woman, and we said, "Is this even possible?" And she said, "Yeah, our daughter's going to go there too." So, long story short, Ryan spent 1st through 5th grade. They called it Primo Elementare, elementary school, and he went with all the other local Italian boys and girls. And when we were leaving, we were at we were going to the base theater. And we're standing in line waiting to see Titanic, right? So it was me, Ryan, Donna, my wife, and our Italian friends, and we were talking. And Ryan was speaking Italian with our friends, and these Italian girls behind me tapped me on the shoulder, and she went, "Hey, Americano." I said, "Yes." His Italian's beautiful. It's native. Because he spoke more Italian when we were there than he spoke English. So, there's those kinds of opportunities. I got really hard into cycling while I was there, skiing while we were there. You get to do all the things that tourists would do, but you live there.
Yeah.
We saw all the great places of Italy. We joined a organization, and every Sunday we met in a small town, and then we would go to another small town where they had what they call Marcia. In Germany they call them Volksmarching, where you go and it's like a little festival, and they have these designated routes that you can either walk or run. And some were 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, and some of the bigger ones had, 50-kilometer walks, right? Or runs. So you would go to these things, they give you a little medal, and you would drink wine and eat pasta and learn about the culture of that small town. So we would do things like that. But there's just all kinds of things that you can do when you live in a foreign country, right? So day to day would be just like any day that you'd have here. We got up in the morning, Ryan went to school, we'd go to our jobs and
do your 9 to 5 and then
fly airplanes, unless there was some other reason not to do a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
There was some kind of alert or some kind of an exercise or things like that, but typical, like any other American would do.
So you spent another 6 years in Italy total.
Yes.
Now is that the last trip, overseas? Or are you back home after that? And
After that, we went to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, where we only spent just short of 2 years because my wife got a job as the senior enlisted person for the chief for the Air Force Academy. She worked for the 1-star, who was the commandant of cadets. So she worked directly with students from the Air Force Academy who were going to later be officers in our Air Force. So we were there for 4 years, and I worked at Cheyenne Mountain as the first sergeant for the Security Forces Squadron. So my old career field, I got to go back and be a first sergeant for a couple of years.
now, dive back into the students that go to the Air Force. I asked you this also before we were on camera, and I feel kind of dumb for asking it, but I'm sure there's other people that feel the same way. Obviously, the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, the Army, Coast Guard Academy, or Coast Guard University.
It's Coast Guard Academy.
Coast Guard Academy.
Right. And
So
West Point, right.
when you go to these places, you are still able to get a business degree, an education degree, a psych degree if you want.
Right.
Obviously, they want you, hopefully, to go down the field of. But what is the obligation? If you go to West Point, you go to the Naval Academy, you go to the Air Force Academy, you're going there for school. You're going to come out a commissioned officer.
Right.
How long do you owe back to the United States? Right? Because it's a trade.
You're going to really one of the best schools in the nation for free, right? And in fact, they all get a stipend as well, so it's more than free.
They're getting paid.
You got to get paid to be there, and you owe something back to the military, to the U.S. government for providing that. And typically, off the top of my head, I think it's 4 years for just a normal commission. But if you're going to fly, if you're going to go get a pilot's license and fly jets, or if you're going to go off and do something like be a lawyer or you're going to be a doctor, then I believe it's 10 years that you owe for pilots. So that's good because you're about halfway to a retirement, when you're a pilot. But it's a lot of money that the Air Force has invested, or the Army, or
whoever. There's a lot
of money they have invested in you, when you do that. So, but it's an amazing environment. The Air Force Academy at Colorado Springs. That was a really cool 4 years as well.
So you come back from Italy, you end up in Nebraska, which I'm not even going to touch on how that had to be a cultural swing.
Big time.
But that also, if the years line up right, you got back here in '99. Yes. 2 years spent in Nebraska leads us into a year that really changed a lot of things for people here in America, and I'm sure specifically military families and whatnot. Because I think you have a pretty interesting story of why you remember that 9/11 was a Tuesday.
Oh, good. Yes, I remember. It's one of the trivia things that I know. What day was 9/11 on? It was a Tuesday, and here's why I remember that, Carlos. Because I had an opportunity. We were in Colorado Springs at Cheyenne Mountain, and one of the guys I worked with had season tickets to the Denver Broncos. So he calls me up on Saturday and he says, "Terry, I can't go to the opening game at the new stadium for the Denver Broncos on Monday night because I have to do something. Do you want the 2 tickets?" So I said, "Sure." So I took the tickets. And we're talking about September 10th, 2001. Right? Broncos versus the Giants. First regular season televised game.
At the new Mile High.
Right? Yeah. And I remember that specifically. The next day we woke up and I was on my way actually to Peterson Air Force Base, I was stationed at Peterson, but I worked at Cheyenne Mountain. If anybody knows the layout of Colorado Springs, that's south from the Air Force Academy. And so I'm going to Peterson for a first sergeant meeting, and I'm on my way down there. And I remember listening to a relatively new sports talk radio show called Mike and Mike in the Morning. And I'm listening.
And now it's not here anymore.
And now it's not, exactly. But they're off doing different things as, go
looking greeny.
That's right. So I'm listening to them talk. I can't remember what they were talking about until they got to the part where they said, "Oh, the TV screens are showing, this plane, I think it was a small plane, flew into and they're going through this whole thing. And by the time I make my way to the first sergeant meeting, it's, full on chaos.
And it's an interesting thing that you bring up, Greeny and Golick talking about it. I actually, last year, I did not realize how many, because I was in fourth grade. I remember watching it happen because our teacher watched Good Morning America.
Yeah.
That live shot of the New York skyline, and then and immediately the TV gets turned off, and you're in fourth grade. We don't know what happens until much later when all the kids are getting pulled out of school and you figure out what's going on. But it's interesting that you talk about how these reporters, because on that day when it was happening, I know Howard Stern's one of the most famous ones.
Yeah.
Is there live commentating.
That's right.
And nobody has an idea of how serious. And, Howard Stern specifically brings up, and I watched it this past 9/11 because I had never heard the full segment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's ironic that he brings up a point, and he's not the only one. There's many reporters that were doing their regular job that day and were covering what was going on. And he makes the comment about how, wouldn't it be crazy if this is a terrorist attack? And that in no other station do you hear that word get thrown out. Mm-hmm. By 5 o'clock that night, it was clear what it was. As a military member, what is that day? So you get to that meeting and all chaos has gone. What is the rest of that day like?
Well, so we were so when you go to a first sergeant meeting, those are the first sergeants from every squadron in the entire wing that are there. So we get there, the wing command chief, the head chief is there, and they typically don't run the meeting, but they facilitate. Mm-hmm. So we get there, and they had TVs at the dining hall. We have them at the base dining hall, and TVs. And so we, like many other people, stood mesmerized watching what was going on. And then by that time, of course, by the time the first World Trade Center building falls, the banter of discussion of what this is starts to bubble up, and so we disperse and go to our squadrons to see what's going on or what we need to do. So I remember walking out with a few people. Now Peterson Air Force Base is located about 4 or 5 miles from the beginning of the Rocky Mountains, Pikes Peak and all that, and then Cheyenne Mountain is south, adjacent to Fort Carson, and so it's about a 15-minute drive for me. So I drove up to the mountain, and you go about 3/4 of the way up, and it's a pretty good vantage point of Colorado Springs and everything. So I get up there, and I'm going into my office, and I turned around to look, and one of the things that I noticed was, because where Denver and Colorado are, it's kind of almost like the center of the United States. Yeah. So at that time, I'm used to seeing all of the contrails that would crisscross the skies of a beautiful blue sky in September for that area. I looked up and it was perfectly clear. No planes flying, none, because they grounded them all by that time. So that's burned in my memory. And then, of course, from then on, we worked 12 hours a day, more. The 12 hours was a shift, but we typically go home, go to sleep, get up, and come back to work again for quite a while. Yeah. Of course, none of our guys deployed anywhere or did anything, but it's also the same time that things changed for Americans, because you wouldn't remember previous to that. You went through and you got checked, but it wasn't anything.
Well, the airport, you could go. Like I remember my grandfather would fly down to Texas because that's where his mom lived. You could go all the way to the gate with him, stand there and watch him wave at the plane, and right after that, no more of that. Not only no more of that, you might as well just say bye to them at the front door, because all of the checks that became from that. I've never flown. It's a small. There's a small little nugget for you. I've never flown, never been on a plane. At least not that I can. I won't say that I might have been a baby and flown somewhere, but everything that I've been told, I'm a car guy. We 4 wheels and we drive places. I don't do roller coasters either.
Got to get you on a plane, Carl.
But I'll get on a plane before I get on a roller coaster. I promise you that, because I don't see any purpose in those things. But I do remember, going to the airport was almost like going to a mall because of the stores and the restaurants and you would get there. it's funny to me, the people I've driven people to the airport from when I was in college, and being that we're 20 minutes, 30 minutes up the road, you make a quick buck driving somebody to the airport needs to go. And it's just a weird feeling now when you get to the airport.
Yes.
You don't want to, I don't say you don't want to make jokes, but you want to be very on point. Like, if you're supposed to be there at this time, you should be there 30 minutes early. But back then it was like you'd go to the airport an hour early, but it was to go to the stores, to go to the restaurant, to eat with whoever was leaving to go away.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing September 12th, that was the end of...
Changed all that. In fact, initially they put armed military and police officers at stationed them there at these places until they were able to figure something else out. That's where TSA was born, after 9/11, and it's never changed.
Now, from 2011 or 2001, how far are we off from the end of your career? On the military side,
Right.
How far?
About 4 years. Then I made the rank of Chief Master Sergeant while I was at Cheyenne Mountain, and then I always aspired to be a command chief. I really enjoyed my job as a first sergeant because you get to take care of people, you get to know what's going on in the unit. There's all kinds of things. It's never ever boring.
Yeah.
There's always something going on, and you really can make a positive impact on people's lives, their careers, their families, and all of those things. So I enjoyed that. So I naturally wanted to experience that at a different level. So when you're in a squadron, this is like one mission, whether it's supply or security police or the hospital or whatever it is, that's what you do, that's what your commander does. So when you go to the next level, that's when you're involved with every squadron, everything that goes on the base. And it's different. So I really wanted to do that. And so that about that time they changed the system. You had to be put on a list. You had to be your records had to be reviewed. You had to be recommended by your wing commander. So when I made chief, I started to fill in for the command chief there at Peterson. And one day I was filling in for him, and somebody at the major command called and said, "Hey chief, I just want to let you know we need to have a chief master sergeant at deployment for the United Arab Emirates, and they need to be in place in." I can't remember exactly when it was, like September of that year, 2002. And I said, "Oh, okay, what's the qualifications?" "Well, they need to have first sergeant background." I said, "Okay, let me give you his name. I got one for you." And the guy goes, "Okay, who?" I said, "Terry Speer." So I was in a good position to volunteer for my own next assignment, temporary duty, the United Arab Emirates. So I got to spend 5 months in Abu Dhabi, Dubai.
And what is the UAE like?
Oh, man.
Because I've heard that it's so developed and so it's just so beautiful when you're there.
First of all, you have to get on a plane to get there.
Yeah, it's not for me.
So no roller coasters, but you get on a plane.
I don't know.
But it's
you're talking about the thing that has wings?
Yes.
No, I like the thing that has 4 tires. It
Okay.
stays on the ground.
Yeah, you can't get there from here with those things, but
Not yet.
But that's true. But the United Arab Emirates is beautiful, and it's hot and humid, of course, because it's close to the sea. But it was really a great assignment. I got to do a lot of great things there. I got to go off base with people. We hadn't been there long, the Air Force.
Yeah.
So one of the things I got to do was go with the services squadron commander, the chaplain, and a couple other people. And we got to go test out all of the resorts in Dubai to negotiate contracts for our airmen to go down there and take R&R.
Yeah.
So I got to go check out all those places. It was a tough job, but somebody had to do it.
Yeah, somebody had to. And you know what? I'm glad it was you.
I am too. So it was a great opportunity, and I always said this since I got back from there. I would put my family on a plane and go to the Emirates tomorrow. It's just so, the people there are wonderful, welcoming. It's not Saudi Arabia by any stretch of the imagination. There's the British are there. There's a lot of international, a lot of Europeans go there, and of course you've seen a lot of Dubai, the growth the enormous growth. Even since I've been there, they didn't have the big building. The only thing they had there, they were starting to build those the palms. You know what I'm talking about? They were starting that when I was there. They hadn't finished it, but the big hotel there that looks like a sail from a ship was there. They hadn't built the Burj Al Arab yet, the big tallest building in the world, but the plans were in place. But it was just a fantastic opportunity to go out and meet different people and experience different cultures. It's cool.
Well, I think that's a good place. We'll take a pause for Act 1. We'll come out in Act 2. We'll talk about retirement from one thing.
Great.
And Act 2 in the field of teaching for you. Okay, I do have to send it as you had a cup of coffee down there, Chambers General Store, because, and you can vouch, if they don't have it, I promise you don't need it. It's everything in there that you can think of. Make sure if you're in the town of Bethany, you stop Chambers General Store. They have breakfast sandwiches, biscuits and gravy, hot soups, lunch special every day, cold cut subs. Starting this Friday, which will be the 4th, up and all the way through Lent, every Friday is Fish Friday. And then you can also, if you can't get to Bethany, you can buy a t-shirt via their Facebook page. It's Chambers General Store, where they have a red shirt that says if Chambers doesn't have it, you don't need it. A burnt orange shirt, to Chambers, same thing. And then the psychedelic green mushroom capital of the world shirt, because the town of Bethany is known as the mushroom capital of the world. Chief Terry Speer joining us here on Dingo Talk. I am Carlo Guadagnino. We're going to be right back, and I'm sure that the second part will have just as many twists and turns as the first part did.
Yeah, it's because it involves you.
Well, yeah, that's why I know this. I know part of the second part. But we will be right back.
You're watching another exciting episode of Dingo Talk, recorded deep in the hidden lair in Bethany, West Virginia, where when you visit, make sure you stop by Chambers General Store. Grab one of our hot breakfast sandwiches made fresh all day. Don't forget the biscuits and gravy or one of the daily lunch specials. And if none of that trips your trigger, cold cut subs, sandwiches, and wraps made fresh all day to your order. Hey, and don't be the only alumni on the block that doesn't have the Chambers. If we don't have it, you don't need it t-shirt, or the latest edition of the Bethany, West Virginia shroom capital of the world in the psychedelic green. Hey, now back to you.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. My guest, retired United States Air Force Master Sergeant Terry Speer. You know,
I know.
We stumble over our words. I haven't changed.
No.
We left off in, we'll say, 2002, 2003, yes, right around there.
Right there.
You end up back here in the United States. How do we get to retirement? How do you get to your rank, and how do we get to retirement?
All right, so I made Chief Master Sergeant. I took that assignment, or that temporary duty, from Cheyenne Mountain Peterson Air Force Base to the United Arab Emirates, where I was like the senior first sergeant there for a few months and really enjoyed it, and came back. So when you go TDY in the Air Force, temporary duty, you go someplace, you come straight back to where you were before. And so there I am. They had replaced me at my other job while I was gone, and I ended up going to a different job temporarily. And I applied for a couple of different positions as a command chief for a wing. The first one was back at Aviano, and thought I was in for that one. Didn't get it. Very disappointed. But immediately applied for another job at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington. That's the eastern part of Washington, very close to that smokestack of Idaho and Montana and things like that. Great mission, KC-135 tankers. Flew up there for my interview. Before I left, the general called me, and the chief called me and said, "Hey, how'd you like to be our next command chief?" And I said, "Well, let me ask my wife first." And I did, and we ended up going to Spokane for the next assignment. Now Donna, who had been the chief at the Air Force Academy, retired and joined me at Spokane. So it's the first time we'd been like that, where she wasn't working and I was.
So, and what was your time in Spokane like?
Oh, that's great. I mean, it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. I mean, it was exciting. It was never, like I said, never a dull moment. Everything that I thought it would be, and the opportunity to work with every aspect of a wing, and to work with the first sergeants that who I had been a part of for so long, and to be part of the Spokane community. I got to sit on the board of a credit union while I was there. I mean, it wasn't just honorary, but it was still pretty cool. And it's just a great experience. Mm-hmm. And I got to, every place you go and every opportunity you have is different, and it affects you differently. But that was a tremendous opportunity, and enjoyed it. And I retired from there.
So, and the retirement comes in 2005.
Yes,
it's the end of Act One.
It is the end of Act One. So early 2005, sometime in July, that I actually did my retirement ceremony and came back here to Pennsylvania.
Now, what factored into the decision?
Family.
It was just time.
Yeah, I mean, Donna's from Dayton, and I'm of course from Pittsburgh, from Freeport, and we had discussed a number of things. I loved that area in Spokane. We discussed it, and my grandfather had recently passed, and I was back, and I just thought it was time to come back here and introduce my family to my historic family, my mom, and all of her family. So it was that time to do that.
It was a homecoming time. It was
time
to come home and
partially emotional, partially the right thing to do. And I had a friend who was a security policeman with me who retired and came back to Pittsburgh, and he got a job. He was a district vice president for a security company called Allied Barton at the time. And Brian called me and said, "Terry, look, are you thinking about coming back here?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I think I have a position for you, but you'd have to come back here and interview." And I did, and I got the position. I ended up managing the security, the contract security for all of UPMC.
Okay.
So I had a job down in Oakland at the medical building, mm-hmm. and that's where my office was. And for about a year and a half, that's what I did.
Now, as we kind of alluded to at the end of the first part, at what point does teaching become where you're going to go?
Well,
because that's a big jump for the people. Like I worked in the security industry.
Yeah.
I know Allied very well from my time in the security.
Yeah.
That is a very different industry than what you're in now, which is the education side of everything.
Right.
How does a guy in that field decide that's where he wants to go?
Well, that's a really good segue to this, right? People that you meet in your life have different effects on you, and you sometimes have to look back to figure that out, right? And so when I was a command chief at Fairchild, I didn't have my bachelor's degree yet. I had three associate's degrees. I dabbled throughout the years and accumulated like a whole basket full.
You had the credits.
Exactly. You had to figure out where to put them.
Which piece goes where.
Right. So Dr. Frank Powers, and Dr. Frank Powers ran Southern Illinois University, which is one of the universities at Fairchild who was contracting. And we were over there visiting, the wing commander and I, one time, and Dr. Powers said to me, "Chief, you have your degree yet?" And I said, "Dr. Powers, I do not." "What are you waiting for, Chief? What are you waiting for?" I said, "Well, I'm kind of the command chief of this entire wing. If you could figure out a day that I could do this, that'd be great." He goes, "I'll call you." So Frank called me and convinced me to take an accelerated course so that I could get my bachelor's degree. And the accelerated course was in workforce education development. Okay. Now, previously, when I was a security policeman, I ran the training section. So I did a lot of training. I had some experience in that. I was a trainer, and I ran the training section for years, and that was kind of my shtick while I was a cop. And so it interested me. So he said, "Listen, I'll work with you, come to class, do your work, things like that. I get what you do, we'll do it." So that's what I did. I signed up for that accelerated class. It was more than I expected. It took a lot of time, but I finished it. And when I was a cop, I was just doing some community service stuff when I came back here. And I had been asked to come speak at this boys' school in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. And it was a bunch of 10th, 11th, 12th grade kids in a room, and they were just bring guest speakers in. And so I'd gone out there, and I wanted to talk about something I thought they might be interested in. So are you familiar with challenge coins in the military? Where people have these coins. You've probably seen them on the president's desk. Behind them, the Army has them, the Navy has them. They're coins specific to a unit, and they're challenge coins, and they're different. There's different histories to each one of them, but basically they're coins, and you can collect them. So I have like 500, like maybe more than that.
Yeah.
So I brought all these cool coins out there, and each one of them kind of have a special place in my military career. So I took them out there and I spread them all over the table, and the kids gathered around and they were looking at them, and I would explain where I got each one of them, whether it was Bosnia or the Emirates or Germany or Italy or Saudi Arabia or whatever it might have been. And little did I know, in the audience was a senior master sergeant and his cadets. And it was I'll mention his name. He's a senior master sergeant, currently still teaches at West Mifflin High School, named Otis DeSerbo. And Otis comes up to me afterwards and introduces himself and shakes my hand. And he says, "Chief, man, that was awesome. My kids loved it. I loved it. Why aren't you teaching junior ROTC?" And I said, "Well, Otis, I know the only position I know of in the area is yours, and you're not going anywhere." And he goes, typical Otis fashion, says, "If I told you there was a position available at Plum Senior High School, would you mind if I told Major Kolar, this senior aerospace science instructor, and if he would give you a call, would you take it?" And I said, "Well, I never thought about it. I have a pretty good job that I enjoy now, but I'm always open to opportunities. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to Major Kolar." 2 days later, Major Kolar calls me. And the next day, I go out to his house. We had dinner, my wife, his wife, at his home just outside of Oakmont. And he said, "You're hired. I want you." And he said, "I will let the school board know. We'll be hiring you in July." And I was like, "All right."
That's amazing. That's pretty, very short to the point. Right. Here we go.
So I ended up going to Plum, quitting my job that one of my best friends in the world gave me the opportunity to do, and that I actually really liked, and took this leap of faith into the educational world. Yeah.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask. 14 years later, is there any hesitation, regrets, or anything about the jumping from the security and more of what you were accustomed to in Act 1, and as we've kind of dubbed here in Act 2, being a teacher? Or is that kind of where you feel that you've gotten almost it's a second calling type?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. Well, but here's the analogy that I do. We just, as you know, Major Kolar retired last year, and we hired a new senior aerospace science instructor. He's a wonderful man, retired lieutenant colonel out of the 171st KC-135. He was a crew member out there, and just a terrific guy. And one of the things I tell him all the time is this, because he's a golfer and I'm a golfer. You golf, Carla?
I
dabble at it?
I swing.
Okay, so do I.
I drink better than I play.
I do too. And so I am on a good day at 25, 26 handicap. Colonel Accomando's 25, 26 handicap. You're probably in high 20s, low 30s.
Yeah.
So as that kind of golfer, where do you spend most of your time?
The rough.
In the woods, in the rough, in the sand, all these other
I
things.
have a permanent spot in a beach,
Right.
in the beach.
Right. So do I. But I love the game of golf, despite all of those things. I spend most of my time in the woods. I lose 5-6 balls every 18 holes.
I don't buy Titleist for that reason.
Exactly, right? But I still keep coming back. Why? Because every once in a while, I'm 140, 150 yards out. I bring out my 8-iron. I hit it, nice lofted shot, and it bounces on the green and rolls up close to the cup, and I go, yes, this is awesome, right? Okay, so that's why I keep coming back. Teaching high school is like that.
Similar.
Most of the days, you're in the rough, you're in the woods, you're like, why am I doing this? This is crazy. And then some alumni calls you and said, Chief, will you come to my radio show? And you have an opportunity to sit and talk to him beforehand and share experiences and know that even just a little bit, even just a smidgen, that if I had anything to do with what you're doing, your success and happiness right now, it makes all of that time in the woods worthwhile. All of it.
So, we'll talk about your time at Plum. I'm going to take a 3-year. I'm gonna focus on a 3-year chunk of your time at Plum. Mainly 2000 and we'll say 6-7 to 2010.
Okay.
Necessarily at the time was not a popular avenue for us as students. We knew that ROTC we were dodgeball players, and that's what we were called.
Right.
And I don't think that flies on the wall could tell the stories of the real conversations that happened in the ROTC classroom. Was that because of the students, or was that because you, Chief Conley, and Major Kolar challenged the group of ROTC cadets to be better than just your look at this is a white shirt? Well, why is it a white shirt? Well, it's a white dress shirt. You guys gave us the tools to look further into things. Was that the student group, or was that always kind of the philosophy from you guys as the teachers?
Yeah, well, I think that I'm the same person today. I mean, I think, Carlo, if you came and visited our North Allegheny Air Force Junior RTC, where I teach now, I think you'd see a real difference in what the students are. That partially is because it's North Allegheny. It's different than Plum. But I think if you went back to Plum, you might find some differences as well. But that's the kind of teachers that we were, and I still am. As you know, Chief Conley retired from Norwin a couple of years ago, and Major Kolar, as I said, retired last year. But we're more a Socratic kind of teachers. We ask a lot of questions, and we expect you to think critically to get those answers. And it's not necessarily because of the group of people that we have, but because that's what we think is most important, right? There's a lot of great curriculum that the Air Force Junior RTC has to deliver, and I think we did a pretty good job of that. But at Plum in particular, because that's where our shared history is, you mentioned dodgeball and dodgeball cadets, and externally outside the classroom, that's what people saw.
It was perceived. It was the perception, but it was not.
People didn't see what the conversations, experiences, the successes, the falls, the get back up, those kinds of things that we did.
Well, and the fact that you guys, and we talked about it beforehand, the fact that you guys were willing to, it's not bad enough you put an 8, 9, 10-hour day in the classroom with a bunch of high school students that, if I may say so myself, we were a bunch of jagoffs.
At times.
There was a group that Plum seemed to hand you guys specifically that was like 6 students, myself and 5 other people, and I will leave their names out of it. But man, I don't know, you guys are saints for putting up with us, but we would see you at basketball games. We'd see you at a JV football game on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. We'd see you on Friday nights at the football games. You went to the plays, you went to the band, the orchestra, the all of those things. It was, and I don't know if that's, I'm not saying that that's not true of other faculty members, but ROTC and Plum JROTC at the time was you, Mage, and Chief. And when one of you came through the door, you knew the other 2 were, somebody was maybe over on this side of the room, but you guys were together. And I think that's one of the things that from the outside perspective was never acknowledged for you guys was that you had a group of students that you took a real interest in. It wasn't just, Veda Dobbins, who we had on the show. Veda goes to the military. You and I had many conversations. At that time in my life in high school, I was going into the military. Didn't work out that way. Veda did. You tell the story of your group of friends. There was a group of us that were all going. We were all going.
We were all going.
The only one that ended up going was Veda.
Yeah.
So, but there was never a question mark of, well, why aren't you going?
No.
It was, well, if that's not what you feel is best, then don't make that decision because these are the other things you have to do.
Right. Well, I think if you've hit on something really important there, and maybe your audience might not pick up on it because aren't familiar with junior ROTC, but the places that do have junior ROTC, our biggest hurdle is convincing people that we're not there to recruit their kids. Yeah. Right. I joke all the time, and Major had the same joke. We don't want 90% of your kids, right? And it's a joke, but that's not what we're there for. We have a specific mission, and that's to develop citizens of character dedicated to serving their nation and community. And what that service is of no consequence to me. I don't get a special pay. I don't get anything extra if some kid decides to join the military. In fact, a lot of kids, I try to talk out of it, not because I just don't think it's for them. People come to us and ask us questions because that's who we are. But we're not there to put you in the military. And as I've told you before in conversation, Carlo, there's people that I'm proud of all of our alumni. I'm proud of them, and I call me or they send me
even you, Garbark. Even you, Garbark. We talked about you today. They're proud of you.
We did, and it's it's some of them go off and have great military careers. And as you do this longer, of course, the more of that you have to look back on, and some of them have great military careers, and I'm really proud of them. But I'm also proud of you. This is a difficult thing you're doing. It takes a lot of guts to grind this out every single day in pursuit of your dreams. And I couldn't be prouder of you about it because I think that's the message that we tried to send you when you were in school. Chelsea Getzy, I don't know if you remember Chelsea or not.
I remember Chelsea.
I mean, she went after, and I thought she was going to end up in the military. Wasn't something that happened for her, but she grinded her. I mean, she went to school. She went to Disney. She made a name for herself, and she wonderfully credited. I think she told me the story one time. The what are those, Monsters Inc. Right?
Yeah,
that Monsters Inc.
Yeah.
Right. So apparently Chelsea had to do some kind of a big gala for them that were celebrating some anniversary. And after she put it all together, and of course in Chelsea Getzy fashion, spectacularly. Somebody asked her.
There was no other way.
Exactly.
There really wasn't.
She's still that way.
Excellence.
By the way.
Excellence to everything.
And excellence is, of course, what? One of our core values, right? Excellence in all we do. And so she credited her experience in junior ROTC putting together things for us, doing those things, because we gave you that opportunity. And that's really what it's about, giving opportunity to be successful, to fall on your face, to pick yourself back up, to go do it more. Okay, all of that stuff. That's what the core is about. And creating relationships, of course.
Which, that part I was really good at. I created a lot of relationships.
Yes.
And
you were my go-to guy in class, man.
I seem to be that. I'm the middle guy. I get you.
Go-to guy in class.
I get you. I'll get people talking. It might not be the right conversation, exactly. But it starts the conversation.
And they might be yelling at each other at the end of it.
But it starts the conversation.
We had some really good conversations.
So, 14 years into Act 2, you're at school, is this the second school?
Yeah, North Allegheny.
And that will be the final stop.
It will.
On Act 2. And then Act 3 starts, where you'll be down there and on the Gulf side of Florida.
Right.
What factored into this year being it?
Well, it's not blame, but it's like negotiated departure. I would have probably gone for another year and a half till I'm 62. I just turned 60 a couple of weeks ago, and I would have probably gone till 62. I still enjoy it. I still think I serve well, and so I really would have done that. But my wife retired from Penn State. She, by the way, retired Chief Master Sergeant herself, and spectacular career, more spectacular than mine, I will say. And she went on to Penn State to work for them, and then ran her own military charitable organization for a while, and then Duquesne University. But she retired, and she's like, okay, I'm ready to go do
time.
this now, right? So I messed up and bought her a house in Florida, and
that was the end of that,
which she now loves. And so anyway, she's ready to move on, and I understand that. So the negotiated time is next January. So I'm going to come back and do a half a year with Colonel Accomando, get him solidly on his feet, hire a good person for him to work with, so that the Corps can continue well, and then that'll be that down to Lakewood Ranch, Sarasota.
So I have two final questions for you. One, 14 years academically and serving in academia, and not, which is a completely different field than any other business in America, truthfully. What do you see as the good things that academia is still providing, and what are some of the challenges that academia can get over? That are the simple challenge. Don't go into the broad.
No politics.
No politics. We're no broad stroking this. I just, if there's a couple things that from the academic standpoint, the academic side can do, the teachers can do, because your mentality, Major's mentality, Chief Conley's mentality, not necessarily the mentality of every teacher. You know, they might say that, it might be part of the mission statement, but you don't see every teacher at almost every event. They got other lives.
Right. It's not their role.
Yeah.
Right.
So now that you're walking away from it, what would you say I guess more of a synopsis of academia as it compares to your Act 1 in the military?
Well, I wish that I had this opportunity to be involved with this role in academia while my kids were in high school and in school, because I would have been way better suited to advise them than I am now. Just like any industry, there are amazing people, and I will say that it's like we always use the 90-10 rule. 10% of the people give you all kinds of problems, 90% of the people are doing a really good job and up to an outstanding job. And I can say that for certain that that's the way the teaching profession is as well. Our times at Plum with Chief and a Major and I, and then we left at almost the same time for reasons that we don't have to talk about now.
Yeah.
But looking back on there are outstanding teachers at Plum that I missed, outstanding administrators. It all comes down to leadership, right? And I'll give you some great examples. And we have some amazing leaders in North Allegheny that provide students opportunities to do just what we talked about, right? And about giving students those opportunities to be what they need to be, to challenge them, but then also to hold them accountable, right? I mean, because we need accountability. When we have freedom, we need accountability, because freedom without accountability is anarchy.
Yeah.
And so we need to have that accountability. So I work for a great organization now, North Allegheny, who seems to understand and get that. And I think that it's tough being a kid. It really is. It's tough right now to be a student. As we just stopped wearing masks together, and
the hybrid learning and all these the interruptions. It just doesn't work well when you're in those teenage years, the adolescent years, and etc. You get into a routine, and the minute that routine gets well, this week the routine is you're going to go to class Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and next week, well, we don't know. You might go. Exactly. You might go. You might not. That's detrimental to the kids.
And each one of them being held to account at a different level and different. It's very strange. And being in high school is difficult, and the expectation level is difficult. Colonel Accomando and I talk about this all the time. we can't believe what these students do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they come, for us, because this is the only perspective I know. They come and they do all these great things for us, lead, and because when we're at those things, their kids, it's because our kids are there, right?
Yeah.
So they're doing that stuff too. Then they have jobs. Then they have responsibilities to their families. I didn't have any of that stuff when I was a kid. You know, there's so much.
I worked at
going
Ripkins
on.
and I had to go to football practice. Those were my two jobs.
I worked at the Kentucky Fried Chicken and I played baseball.
Yeah,
and
those
I
were my
mowed the
two
grass.
jobs.
And that's all I had to do, right?
Oh, I did forget that. I mowed the grass
mowed
for
the
my
grass.
grandparents. That was
Exactly.
my 3 jobs.
These students are doing so much and balancing so much that we have to watch out for that. Okay, we have to give them great mentorship and advice and leadership, and give them opportunities. And I sometimes forget that myself. You know, I'm a human being, and I get frustrated with them and things, and then I have to step back and say, "Gosh, man, look at all the stuff they're doing. Look at all the things they're accomplishing." And then, you know, we have to get to know them better. We have to understand who they are, because
There is no cookie cutter. Every one of them is a different person.
And they come into our classroom and leave our classroom every day, coming from and going to things we had no idea, right? And we have to treat them with compassion and empathy and all of those other things while holding them accountable and making sure they understand all of these things, right? And it's hard, but it's a very important and worthwhile thing, and I don't regret a single day of it.
Well, so let's talk about specifically a 17, 18-year-old high school student that, you know, for the most part, I've done alumni and different avenues for the college experience. What would you, and I've had this conversation with you, so I'm pretty sure I know where we're going to go with it, but what would you tell a student that comes to you and says that they are torn between enlisting, get in their 4 years or their 6 years or their 10 years, and then going and pursuing academics after, or going to college? Is it purely, like you said, there's no cookie cutter?
There's not.
So it's different student to student. But what would the advice be? Let's say, I'll use my example. I come to you and Chief, I think I want to be in the Navy. I think I want to go to the Navy.
Okay.
What would your advice be to me as 18-year-old me?
Well, initially, when I started doing this, I was full of advice, right? And what you end up learning is that we talked about the cookie cutter and different kids, different aspirations, different reasons for doing things. So I start all of those conversations with questions like, Carlo, what do you want? Carlo, why are you considering doing this? What do you plan to do with your college degree? What college degree do you plan to pursue? It's a series of questions and answers, and then no direct advice. No, I would go to school if I were you, Carlo. I would join the military if I were you, Carlo. That doesn't come from me. You know, that only can come from you, and your parents, if your parents are involved that much with your life. And so I don't ever give strict advice like that. I always ask questions, pose questions, discuss, and lead the student to the answer that they wanted anyway.
So it's guidance to where they already know that they are.
Has to be.
Would you say that based off of those original questions, as that first question to, I want to join the Navy, and you start asking your feeler questions basically.
Right.
Do you get a sense at that point what the destination is on that answer? You know what I mean? Like how,
Yes.
like we're if you were talking to me and I said, well, I want to play football, but I can't. I'm not really smart enough to get into school with my grades. So it seems like the military is the right way. But you clearly know, well, he wants to play football.
Right.
So that's where the answer, you can kind of figure that out and say, okay, that's where that student wants to go. Let's guide him to figuring out that that's where he wants to
For
be.
themselves.
For themselves, not giving them the answer. It's
Right.
finding
For
the
questions
answer.
like, how important is it to you? If it's so important that you'll regret it, then will you be able to do it? Let's say you go in 4 years to the Navy or the Air Force. Will you be able to still do that 4 years from now? Or will you still have
the desire.
Or we used to have naval opportunity. If you go seek out your dream to play football, even if it ends up being 1 or 2 years, and then go in the military. I mean, those are all, by providing a true and factual scenarios, then the student can make their own mind up. Like, yeah, she's right. I mean, if I go in the Air Force now and I end up liking it 4 years, 6 years, I may never play football. If I go here and go to school and go and complete my degree, I can still have an opportunity to go in the military.
And
And they still may not make that decision.
Yeah.
But laying out all of the
options.
scenarios,
It's like a test, right?
Exactly.
A, B, C, and D,
Exactly.
and here's the answers. Obviously, this answer is not great, and this answer is not great. So pick between. So
It's not up to me to tell you what. It's up to me to give you the
I know,
opportunities and information. You know what I'm saying?
I've been trying for 14 years to give you to just tell me what the damn answer is, and you don't tell me what you make me figure out the answer, and sometimes they're good, sometimes the answer I picked C when you told me C was not the answer, and then I learned why C wasn't the answer. So we have come to that point, though. I want to thank you twice. One, thank you for your service. Thank you. Also, and this is another thank you for your service, but on the other side of that, 14 years as a teacher and an educator, it's not easy. You know, you have parents, you got the faculty, you got administrators, you got the students. There's a whole lot that goes into being especially in 2022. So thank you for continuing to educate our students, and just thanks you in general for stopping down here. I know it's the first time you got to see Bethany, so don't blink or you'll miss the other side of town. This is only one half of town.
Yeah.
There's another half. It's not big, but there's another
I
half.
saw the town square down here.
No, town square's the other side.
Oh, okay.
It's just a dog park. We
Okay.
just put a picnic bench there so that it looked nice.
Got it.
But I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. Chief Terry Speer, retired United States Air Force, Chief Master Sergeant. For those that aren't part of the Air Force that wouldn't know that was his rank. We're here every Thursday. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and iHeartRadio now. iHeartRadio, Apple Music, YouTube, and Spotify. Just type in Dingo Talk. You can do that same thing on TikTok and Twitter. And the only one that we didn't get Dingo Talk as the strict handle was Instagram. So it's Dingo_Talk. Somebody already has Dingo Talk. I looked up that page. It's literally a page of wild dingoes.
Wild dingoes.
Have you seen the face where you can make the faces talk?
Yes.
It's a dingo that talks. I can't compete with that, so Dingo_Talk it is. This has been Dingo Talk. We are here every Thursday, 10 a.m. on YouTube, and subsequently 11 o'clock on the other platforms. And we will be back next week, Chuckleheads.
You wanna know by now. You wanna know by now. You wanna know